rise in body or spirit as we sing together our opening hymn, Joyful, Joyful, We Adore Thee.
Field and forest, vale and mountain, flowery meadow, flashing sea, chanting bird and flowing fountain, call us to rejoice in thee. Thou art giving and forgiving, ever blessing, ever blessed, wellspring of the joy of living, ocean depths of happy rest. Thou our Father, Christ our brother, all who live in love are thine. Teach us how to love each other, lift us to the joy divine. Join the mighty chorus, which the morning stars began. The love divine is reigning o'er us, binding all in its span. Ever singing, march we onward, victors in the midst of strife. Joyful music leads us onward in the triumph song of life.
Welcome. We're glad everyone's here. Before you sit down, can we ask you to condense a little to create a few more seats? We have some family members that are overflowing. And maybe the Edge Hill Choir wouldn't mind sitting on one of the side benches. Thanks, Owen. Owen takes after his dad. So we have family, we have a pew that's opening up over here on this side. Okay. Please be seated. Welcome, friends. This is quite a beautiful and sacred congregation gathered on this special day. We're gathered here to praise God and witness to our faith as we celebrate the long and truly remarkable life of Jim Zralek. And that alone makes today a very special, special day for everyone gathered here. The creation of today's celebration was an act of love from Jim's sons, Brian and Stephen. It was quite an honor to see the love and energy they put into crafting this service. And if the processional was any indication, coordinating and collaborating across all these various circles of Jim's life is a lot like herding cats. But they did a phenomenal job creating a service that is going to be meaningful and authentic to shine the light of God's love on Jim's life, and that's why we're here. Nancy Crutcher is the director of neighborhood ministries at Edge Hill United Methodist Church, and she and I were talking this past week about how much Jim loved walking around the Edge Hill neighborhood, going into the Edge Hill apartments, and he was doing this into his 90s, getting to know the neighbors and finding ways to help people in need and always trying to register them to vote. He consistently supported Edge Hill efforts to empower and fight for the well-being of the 400 low-income families that live there adjacent to the church. For Jim Zralek, justice was central to his life, and he clearly understood that justice is simply another way to love. So how do you feel today? Are we in grief? Most of us are struggling. He was a special man. We miss Jim, and we certainly grieve his death. We have to grieve in order to acknowledge our human loss, recognize our emotions. But when someone lives a life as long and as full as Jim Zralek, and impact as many lives as Jim did, we all truly have permission to celebrate joyfully. He lived to almost 94 years old. I have a theory that no one lives that long and is that happy unless they've truly grown into the person God created them to be. And that was Jim Zralek. May God grant us grace that in community we find love, in pain we find comfort, in sorrow hope, and in death resurrection. Jesus said, "I am the resurrection and I am life. Even though they die, yet shall they live. I am the Alpha and the Omega, the beginning and the end, the first and the last. I died, and behold, I am alive forevermore. Because I live, you shall live also." I'd now like to welcome my friend and longtime spiritual leader at Edge Hill, Beth Richardson. Beth is an ordained elder in the United Methodist Church and serves as the dean of the Upper Room Chapel and their director of prayer and worship. Beth.
You are my beloved, on you my favor rests. Before you were imagined, I held your heart in mine. You are my beloved, for you my love grows deep. Before, behind, within you, I live, and you are mine.
We now have a beautiful ritual to share. It's presenting and explaining some symbols of Jim's life. We welcome Amy, Peter, and Melvin.
This cross, created by Pat Langdon and given to Jim for being a legendary teacher, is made from the wood in the old gym floor at Father Ryan High School. It represents the deep friendships he forged there in the classrooms, the communities, and in the faculty house. Personally, I'm especially grateful for the one with my dad, Ed, that has extended our family into the Zraleks for the last 50 plus years. It also represents the ongoing influence of Jim's years teaching. The spiritual foundation he provided continues today as those he taught serve, advocate, and follow his example, striving to make this world a more just, loving place. This chapel is full of these folks today. Thank you.
This briefcase is a world with plenty of memories. I've been knowing Jim many, many years. And as the pastor was saying about the voting, he used to keep getting on me. You can go vote, man. You can go vote. Tell me where to go. He had it already blueprinted. I thank God for allowing me to be able to know a man like that. I thank God for allowing me to be able to stand and say something great that he has done for me and other people. Jim would, for the last 20 years, Jim would come and pick me up, take me to all these eateries. Up, hamburger up, and I ain't never been in them places. I'm a Crystal man. And the whole thing about it, he was my friend. Christmas, he'll call me and let's meet here. Or where you want to go eat at? He had a little envelope sitting on the thing. We would talk, drab, teas and stuff like that. But the most thing about it, I enjoyed it. He taught me, he opened doors that could never been opened for myself. This briefcase, if it could talk, you will find wonders of some of the things that Jim had done. He never was without it. I worked for the Room in the Inn. That's where I met him. He was everything to me. He wasn't my daddy, but he acted like it. Because he would tell me the right things to do. He would tell me what door to open and what door to go through. I was a man with a lot of circumstances, but he didn't care. He didn't care. He took me by the hand and took me where I needed to go, and I learned from him. He gave me a lawnmower, and I didn't have no transportation. He worried me about that lawnmower coming and get it, come and get it. Son ended up bringing it to my house. These are the things this man done that a lot of people would never know. Some, I knew y'all would, but I'm talking about in the other world. See, I'm in the other world. And I thought I would wear a suit, but I'm gonna come as I am because that's what he would want. I feel that I'm honored to be able to pick this briefcase up for my friend,
I had the honor of sitting with Jim, deep honor, during these last weeks. And one day morning, I was with him. He was in his bedroom in his chair, and he pointed to this, his chalice, which was on his bureau. that I actually had never seen before. And he explained to me that it was his parents had it made when he was ordained in 1955. And he asked me to pick it up and read what was inscribed on it, and said that he had lived according to that all of his life. And I read it, "Not my will, but thine be done." Now, some might say that that means to live selflessly, but I would say that Jim lived selfishly as one who found his deepest joy in willful acts of gifting others. Jim's cup is full of grace, and he freely gave it everywhere and to everyone he met.
We now have a prayer for you to be led by Pat Thompson.
This is a prayer that Jim recited many, many times to his sons in the evening as they were getting ready to go to bed. Sometimes I think it took a long time to get those guys in bed. At any rate, it's called the Prayer of St. Patrick, and it's a Druid prayer that really acknowledges the presence of the simplicity of God in creation. Jim always said, and I always believed it, that all Patricks are saints, and hence the name, the Prayer of St. Patrick. I arise today, the strength of heaven, the light of the sun, the radiance of the moon, the splendor of fire, the speed of lightning, the swiftness of wind, the depth of the sea, the stability of the earth, the firmness of rock. God with me, God before me, God behind me, God in me, God beneath me, God above me, God on the right, God on my left, God when I lie down, God when I sit down, God when I arise, God in the heart of everyone who thinks of me, God in the mouth of everyone who speaks of me, God in every eye that sees me, God in every ear that hears me. Thus I arise today through the strength of God.
A reading from Matthew 25. For I was hungry and you gave me food. I was thirsty and you gave me something to drink. I was a stranger and you welcomed me. I was naked and you gave me clothing. I was sick and you took care of me. I was in prison, and you visited me. Then the righteous will answer him, Lord, When was it that we saw you hungry and gave you food, or thirsty and gave you something to drink? And when was it that we saw you a stranger and welcomed you, or naked and gave you clothing? And when was it that we saw you sick or in prison and visited you? And the king will answer them, truly I tell you, just as you did it to the one of the least of these, you did it to me. The word of God for the people of God.
They must play that song a whole lot at Edge Hill because we heard it a whole lot in my house. They asked if I wanted that to be a congregational song, and I said, no, we've sung that enough. Why don't you just let the choir do that one? Our lifelong friend, Ron Medlin, when we were getting ready for this, said he couldn't wait to celebrate what had to be one of the greatest lives ever lived. And what a gathering to celebrate and honor him. It's great for us as the family, and I hope also for all of you to look out and see so many of our family members from so many different generations in different states who've come together to honor my dad. I mean, people who have married into marriages are here to celebrate him. People from friends who my dad made and taught when he first came to Nashville in 1955, right, spanning. I've just learned about Ross, who my dad befriended from the church over the past few years and was taken to lunch. I had no idea. I mean, like, you think that older people get inward, and some do. He just kept getting out, and he just kept making new friends. And it doesn't have to be the traditional way. You can still live a life like he did. So all of that to say thank you, each one of you. If I don't get to personally hug you, but I hope I do, it means a lot that you're here. My dad knew how to live, and he knew what was important, and he focused on the important. We witnessed him living out his values every day, just like you heard in Matthew 25. I mean, there is not a better reading to encapsulate, I don't even know the right word, encapsulize, whatever, to gather my dad's life together. It's Matthew 25 about welcoming the stranger and visiting the prisoner. I mean, he literally did all of that. He was a man of the highest principles, and as my good friend and mentor Charles Bone would say, my dad was the real deal. One of my earliest memories of Dad was him teaching me how to ride my bike on Woodhaven Road, right off Woodmont. We had what seemed like a big hill. You drive by it now, it's really little, right? But we had a little hill in front of us. And I remember him holding on to that bike until I was ready for him to let go, and he did. And biking is always something that we loved when I was growing up to do as a family, and it's something that I've passed on to our own kids. We love biking so much with Marlo and Owen as a family. And my dad loved it so much that even in his 90s, we gave him a new bike, a Huffy, when he turned 90. And we quickly all decided that that was a bad idea. His balance was a little off, just a little off. So it is there, Dan Hogan, for you to pick up to give to some Afghan refugees. He would love that. He loved being a grandfather. He worshiped my kids, Marlo and Owen, and Brian's kids, Naomi and Micah. They all called him Pa, short for Grandpa. And more than a hero, he was their friend. Every morning, as my kids left for school, he would stand, he would climb his stairs. He had the garden apartment. We built this house together, and he was on the bottom floor. He would climb up the stairs to wave goodbye to my kids. He would wait. Sometimes we were way off. He's like, where were y'all? I waited 15 minutes for you. And if you look on the back of the program, you'll see a picture that I took of him waving goodbye to us. Only in his final week did he not climb those stairs to wave goodbye. Jamaica and I were talking earlier, and it was so impressive that this man who was born in 1928, before the Great Depression, in Chicago, the middle of 5 kids, the only boy, 2 older sisters, 2 younger girls, his parents, his father was an immigrant. The way that we raise our children, and he saw the good, the bad, and the ugly every day, had to be different than the way that he raised us, and very different than the way that he was raised. But he never once told us how to do it differently. He would point out what we were doing right, and he'd praise us. He protected his independence. He would say, no, thank you for volunteering to drive me somewhere. He had a little Prius until he wrecked it twice in 2 weeks. And he decided to not drive anymore, which was better than us having to tell him. Our neighbor Soren, this little boy, walked him home. And there were 4 neighbors that called me within an hour. We were out of town, and he got on me. He thought that he was embarrassed. He was like, why did you tell all the neighbors that I wrecked? And then the next day he called to apologize, and he said, Stephen, the mail lady told me she was sorry that I had an accident. Everybody loved my dad. But he really did. He protected his independence, and he refused help because he said that if he accepted help, it would be a slippery slope, and he knew that that would be the end. In his final couple weeks, he had to let us help him, right? It's the natural order of things. He couldn't get out to see spring unfolding, and he loved spring, so I would, on my walks with Henry, I'd cut a few sprigs from Luda's wonderfully smelling bush, sorry Luda, sprigs of daffodils and hyacinth, and I'd bring it into him. We would read Mary Oliver poems to each other. It was my job. He couldn't bend over anymore to put on his socks and shoes, so I would do that for him. Compression socks are no joke, people. I mean, those things are hard to pull on. They are hard to pull on. One day when I was helping him with his socks, I told him, and I started to cry a little bit. I said, I'm going to miss you. And he said, don't tell me that. You're making me sad. And I said, I'm not telling you to make you sad. I'm telling you because I want you to know how much I love you. Like all Zraleks, there's a few others here, he had a very hard time taking compliments. My wife has worked on me for 15 years now to just say thank you. But he instead said, just think of all those people down at the Campus for Human Development who don't have this. I was like, I just want us to have this, you know. The day before he died, when Brian and I were helping him change his linens and do things that you don't aspire to do, right, but that you need to do. And I would say to all my young friends whose parents are not older yet, do not ship that off to someone else. That is the richest time. He said to us, I'm going to miss y'all. We knew he loved us. He'd always told us. But that meant a lot. And I would say, in closing, just like when he helped me learn how to ride a bike, we had the honor to run along beside him until he was finally ready to go. And then, just like he did, we all let go.
Good morning. My name's Marlo. And one of the things that I loved most about Pa was the fact that he was always talking, singing, or humming a sweet tune. It was never just quiet with him. When he sang, he always had a way of bringing an uplifting spirit into the room. I remember this one day, I was like 8 maybe, and I was really upset and sad about something. I went down to Pa's apartment, all teary-faced. He made me sit down next to him and talk to me in his special way, which is so calming. It instantly brought this overwhelming feeling of relief and happiness back. Now, I can't even remember why I was upset, but I can still remember that amazing feeling that he brought back to me. I know for a fact that I will always miss being able to go down there and steal a lollipop or hear him humming the sweet tune of a little song. But I know that he'll still always be there to talk to when I am sad. I can see him in every sunrise and in every sunset, in every tree and in especially the redbirds. Pa, he had such an amazing, uplifting attitude. It made everyone in the room that he walked into want to smile. My favorite song that he sang was I've Got a Tiger by the Tail. It was about this man who was really scared because he had a tiger by the tail. I loved it because it made me giggle. I remember just sitting in his room laughing my head off at that song. He always made me feel that way, and I'll never forget that.
Good morning. Yes. I'm Owen, aka Paul's favorite grandson. Don't tell Micah I said that though. One of my favorite things I did with my grandpa was we would go in the backyard and build together. My grandpa was amazing. He was so great. One of the things y'all may not know is that he lived with us. My dad said that. And if I went down there and asked him if I could build with him, he would say, sure, or let me take a nap first, then of course we can. And even if he thought my ideas wouldn't work, he would still let me try just to see what would happen. One of my favorite things about him was how agreeing he was with us and how much love he had for all of our family. Thank you.
Okie doke. Wow. Didn't know how many people were here. This is Naomi. You want to say hi? So this has already been said, and I'm going to repeat some stuff. Dad's values, justice, equality, fairness, were really qualities that he embodied. He didn't even need to say anything. If you knew him, you knew that. He would let you know he wasn't perfect, as Stephen said, wasn't great with compliments. But he lived really with sincerity and devotion to those things that he cared about. And he set an astounding example. He set a bar so high that you shouldn't really even try to meet it. You just live your life. And he wasn't only amazing in how he lived his life, he was amazed. He was easily amazed, which was sometimes kind of funny. It could be something as serious as wars and violence, or something as mundane as technology, or something as profound as the people that he loved and admired. He would say, "Can you believe that? I can't believe it." Or, "Get a load of this." And one of my favorites was, "Really?" And "really" was also a way to say, I might not agree with you on that. And if you knew, you would know that if you knew him well. And it's better, for him it was better to say "really" than it was to say "I disagree." Dad expressed profound amazement about his situation in life. Just sitting across the table from him, he would say, "I can't believe I'm sitting here across the table from my son. I can't believe I have one son in this house and one son across town, and I've got these grandchildren. I can't believe it." He just felt so lucky, and we did too. And so there's just so much to say about someone who's lived 93 years. Amazing chronicles, stories, lessons, such a rich life. Stephen mentioned child of the Great Depression, child of immigrants. That was pretty. Married our mom. We lost our mom. So many adventures. Dad taught me how to ride my bike too, and when he let go and I felt the wind in my hair and I saw the ground moving underneath my feet, I freaked out. And I wrecked. I intentionally pulled over into the ditch, and I looked back at Dad and I said, "Why'd you let me go?" And that's how we learn. We have to let go. Dad read the Tennessean every day, religiously. He kept up with the real world, the public affairs, the politics, the dirty stuff, and he shared that with me. That was important. Family was tremendously important. We traveled the country, not just to Kentucky and to Chicago to see family, but to California, to Wisconsin, to New England. He loved to embarrass us. He was not easily embarrassed, but he loved to embarrass us. And we loved to go fishing. We really, my fishing trips with Dad were mostly we would sit there and enjoy the natural world and hope that you would get a little bite. But we would go fishing on our trips, and one time I don't remember where we were, but we were ordering fast food in some restaurant, Mom, Stephen, and I, and Dad went to get some worms. And we're sitting there eating our Hardee's or whatever, and suddenly Dad comes walking down through the parking lot with his little bucket of worms that he pretends like he's going to eat one. And just was horrible. Dad loved to sing. He taught us songs that probably no kids these days would have heard of. Tiger by the Tail probably being one of them. Old Mill Stream. I Wash My Hands in Muddy Water. And then Kathleen and Magdalena Hootenstein or Wallenbein or Hokum Flokum Blokum was her name. See? Nobody knows that one. So, Dad's spirituality was really where things intersected. He lived out his faith, which was clear both if you just saw him and saw the way he lived his life, as well as if you just sat down with him and had a conversation. He lived out his faith. And in this way, the way he loved people, he was a radical. He was a radical man. Among his friends, a former prisoner, his best friend was a former prisoner until he died. People who'd been homeless, people who were underdogs, people going through hard times, those were Dad's friends. He defended the underdog. He looked with a jaundiced eye, as he liked to say, on those with unchecked privilege and power. In spirituality, he did pray. And sometimes I would walk in on him with his eyes closed, and I thought he was asleep. I'd say, "Dad, what are you doing?" Saying my prayers. Maybe. He might have also been sleeping. His texts were not just the Bible. His texts were Greg Boyle, Richard Rohr. And he shared that with his group of friends who got emails on at least a weekly basis. You knew what he was reading. I remember being younger than 5 years old, Dad driving Stephen and me around town through neighborhoods that we would not have seen, around people that were not like us. And Dad taught me that there's joy and there's sorrow and there's life, and these are people, and get in a relationship with people. He counted among his heroes not only John Lewis and John Kennedy. Do you want to stand? Granddad and Anna with Micah. Okay, I'm almost done, promise. His heroes were Nancy Crutcher, Melvin Skates, Don Beiswinger, Charlie Strobel. Everyday people. His Wednesday morning breakfast crew, and his 3-year-old daughter, Naomi. Yeah. He called you his Christmas angel, right? Mm-hmm. I hope she and her brother, Micah, who's 7, who my dad said was getting more and more handsome every day, and he's on the cover of the program. I hope that they will live out a life that they know what he cared about, and I believe they will. Dad was not afraid to say that he loved us. He was not afraid to express his amazement and his wonder, his almost disbelief, right? I'm going to finish with a passage from Gilead by Marilyn Robinson. Dad gave me his copy, which is underlined, fully annotated, and I can't read everything you wrote, but it's about a 67-year-old preacher who remarries and has a child who's 6 years old. If you haven't read it, it's really, really good. And it's the minister writing to his little son, and the minister says, "I'm writing this in part to tell you that if you ever wonder what you've done in your life, and everyone does wonder sooner or later, you have been God's grace to me. A miracle, something more than a miracle. You may not remember me well at all, and it may seem to you to be of no great thing to have been the good child of an old man in a shabby little town you will no doubt leave behind. If only I had the words to tell you. Dad often said he loved me even when he was fragile near the end of his life. Today I want to thank you, Dad. Your love and your life were beautiful, and I love you."
Thank you, gang. That was beautiful, and so much of it resonated with me hearing it. I remember having conversations with Jim, trying to ask, "Well, how are you feeling? How are you doing?" And he was a master at turning that around when I'm telling him my whole life story, and he was very good. But at this point, I'd like for us to join our voices together in song, and I invite you to stand as you are able, and let's sing "Be Not Afraid" that's printed on the middle of your bulletins.
Shall not die of thirst.
I would like to invite Sarah and Ellen up to our lectern mic. We are going to lead you in a prayer of remembrance and thanksgiving. And most of this prayer was written in collaborative effort of the community that surrounds the Zralek family. Brian and Stephen invited people to contribute what aspects of their father's life are people grateful for, thankful for. And of course, the emails started flying. So they worked diligently to craft these many responses into today's prayer. So we welcome Ellen and Sarah to pray a series of petitions, and after each one, we will all affirm them with the response, "We give thanks." You'll see them printed in your bulletin. So let us pray.
For Jim's bravery in so many ways, including following his heart and falling in love with Linda, leaving the priesthood, getting married, and starting a family.
For the way Jim and Linda completed each other's lives, and for his devotion to Linda throughout their marriage and in her final days on earth.
Thanks.
For his love of family, his parents and 4 sisters, his sons Brian and Stephen, their wives Sarah and Jamaica, his 20 nieces and nephews, and the families that both he and his children married into, each person bringing him immense joy.
We give thanks.
For his love of grandchildren, woodworking with Owen and showing him how to mow the lawn, baking brownies with Marlo, reading stories and playing with Naomi and Micah. They lit up his life.
For Jim's big, tender heart and his openness with his emotions, weeping when he spoke of meeting John Lewis, or quoting his favorite author, Jesuit priest Greg Boyle, who lives with the poor and homeless.
For Jim's infectious laugh and the way he used humor in the face of suffering to balance his deep capacity for grief and compassion.
We give thanks.
For his meals with friends and family, for his world-famous spaghetti, for great conversations, always showing interest in what others were thinking and had to say.
We give thanks.
For Jim's many letters to the editor, calling us all to serve and encouraging a more inclusive and equitable country.
We give thanks.
For showing his students and all of us how to love the poor, for starting the Sugar Shack, and for setting a lifelong example of including the least among us.
We give thanks.
For the way he often told his Wednesday morning breakfast crew when he was saying goodbye to them, "I love you, brother."
We give thanks.
For Jim showing up at so many of the Metro Development Housing Authority meetings to represent the voice of the poor and the vulnerable, so much so that when they upgraded the sound system, they informally named it in his honor.
We give thanks. For being a man full of courage, honesty, enthusiasm, and boundless love, finding a connection with everyone he met from all walks of life, and making each one of us know we were important to him.
We give thanks.
For being our role model, showing us that citizenship and faithfulness require presence and listening, for seeing the worth and dignity of all living creatures and speaking truth from his heart.
We give thanks.
For adopting his neighbors, young and old, on Woodhaven, Rolling Fork, Bonner, Eden, and Green Hills Drive, always striking up a conversation and greeting everyone with a smile while walking many family dogs over the years, most recently Henry, who misses his favorite companion.
We give thanks.
For Jim's humility, his patience, his love of learning, his ease of teaching, his intellectual curiosity and engagement of people of different faith traditions, and his joy at watching young people pick up the torch and fight for justice.
Give thanks. For Jamaica, who went with Jim to every doctor's appointment and every treatment over the past 5 years, and who he loved like a daughter. To Jim's doctors, who gave us 4 more years than anyone thought possible. And for all those who sat vigil with him in his final days, Sarah,
And Ellen.
Donnie and Sharon, Peter and Karen. Their presence gave him comfort and peace.
We give thanks.
For Jim's speech at his 90th birthday celebration, which was amazing, unforgettable, and full of heart.
We give thanks.
For his love of dancing at home or whenever the Spirit moved him, and especially at weddings.
We give thanks.
Hold on to me.
God of love, we thank you for all with which you have blessed us even to this day, for the gift of joy and service in our days of health and strength, and for your abiding presence and promise in days of pain and grief. We thank you for how masterfully you use each of us as channels of your love to others, a love that flows so abundantly through those gathered here, remembering and celebrating Jim's life. It's remarkable that most of us gathered here have been profoundly impacted by his humble and faithful life. We thank you for home, family, friends, and neighbors, all whom we share this fragile planet, all of whom Jim looked at and could only see your beloved children and his brothers and sisters. We thank you that you are the God of all of us, regardless of the imperfect words we use to describe what it is we believe. We are grateful to have our place alongside all who have ever lived and died. Above all, on this very special day, we thank you for the life, teachings, and story of Jim Zralek. May you receive him into the arms of your mercy and raise him up with all your people, and raise us into new life as well, as you empower us to love and serve others half as well as Jim did his entire life. We pray this with open and loving and humble hearts. Amen. I now invite you to stand as you are able in body or in spirit, and let's sing Draw the Circle Wide as it's printed in your bulletin. Please be seated.
I'm going to vary a little bit from this program. I was sitting with Jim a few days before his death, and I said, "Would you like for me to read to you?" He had this little book beside his bed. Some of you may know this book. It's Linda's book of poetry. And he said, "Read me from the book. Read me page 24. This is it. I strongly suspected, I pretty much knew that I would love you. But what I could not foresee was how much. I never envisioned the countless ways you would bring me joy and delight into my life." Jim said, that was Linda's poem to me. Is it anything like this, O great hawk, to be held carefully by wind waves, to float with currents, where there is no gravity, no fear, only the open meadows of blue sky and puffy white clouds? I'm a small canoe on the Okanagan near Water's Meet. It's late afternoon on a hot, clear day. I've been on this river since morning, singing and laughing, sharing jokes and food. Now I'm lazy, just a soft sweep on to the right, then to the left, coming near the end and stretching out the pleasures as I float by. I wonder, could this be paradise?
Before I give you your benediction, I want to remind everyone that following the service, the family will be gathered over in the Bennett room in the building right through these doors. You can have a bite to eat, a light lunch. So after the service and after the postlude, we want to give the family a moment to make their way over there, and then we can all head over there to join them. With that, allow me to give you this benediction. Go in peace in the name of our Creator, our Redeemer, and our Sustainer, and live your life by following Jim Zralek's example. Open your hearts and your lives to the poor and the disadvantaged living in our midst. Remember, each of them carry the same image of God within them as each of us do. Amen.
I gather this was Jim and Linda's